Hey guys, tonight we're staying up way past bedtime, because the dark out here isn't the kind that ends when the sun comes up. It's the kind that starts 7 miles beneath your feet and keeps going until the word down forgets what it means. You feel that little shiver when the elevator drops too fast. Multiply it by every nightmare you've ever had about drowning, then wrap it in cold that can crush steel into tinfoil. That's where we are right now. Muffled sonar pings drift past the viewport like slow heartbeats, each one taking 4 seconds to crawl back from the trench walls. The floodlamps catch drifting snow, marine snow, they call it. Dead things raining forever in slow motion. Every flake glows for half a heartbeat when the bioluminescence wakes up, little ghost lanterns that know we don't belong here. And somewhere behind the glass, something knows we just turned the lights on. You probably won't make it to the surface after this one. Not all of you, anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious who else is awake while the rest of the world pretends the ocean has a bottom. Now, dim the lights. Maybe let the sound of the ocean play softly in the background, and let's dive into tonight's descent together. My name is Dr. Mara Calder, Principal Acoustician on the DSV Abyss Whisper, the only sub rated for full ocean depth that still runs analog gauges because digital lies when the pressure remembers your sins. We're funded by a consortium that doesn't put its name on anything. Shell companies nested like matryoshka dolls until the money smells only of salt and old secrets. Our mission patch is just a black circle. They told us it represents the sound horizon. I think it's a hole they want us to fall through. We launched from the support ship Chalice at local midnight, November 7th, surface calm enough to mirror the Milky Way. By the time we crossed 1,000 meters, the stars were gone, and the only light was the soft green pulse of the control yoke in my lap. The pilot, Jens, kept humming something in Norwegian that sounded like a lullaby and a warning at the same time. Our third crew, Dr. Rao, sat dead center, fingers dancing over the scanner console like he was playing a piano only he could hear. The scanner is why we're here. Not sonar. Sonar is a flashlight. This is a resonance cartographer, a phased array lattice that sings in frequencies low enough to make whales flinch. It maps density discontinuities by listening for the echo of the planet's own heartbeat. The Mariana Trench is supposed to be simple, 7 miles of water, then basalt, then mantle. Rao said the grant required one full vertical profile, edge to edge, nadir to nadir. Just one sweep. Then we surface, publish, collect our hazard pay, and never tell our therapists what we saw. We reached the trench floor at 2:14 ship time. The bottom looked wrong immediately, like wet charcoal rubbed across black glass. No pillow lava, no xenophyophores, none of the usual benthic gardens. Just smoothness. Too smooth. Jens eased us into a hover 5 meters up, thrusters whispering so softly I felt them in my teeth more than heard them. Rao powered the array. The sub's frame gave one low groan, the way a violin body sighs when the bow first touches string. Then the scanner began to sing. It wasn't loud. It was intimate. A sub-bass thrum that bypassed my ears and pressed directly against the inside of my sternum. The sound had layers, like whale song slowed until every note lasted a lifetime. I watched the spectrum analyzer bloom in shades of indigo I didn't know existed. First return came back in 14.2 seconds, exactly what we expected. 10,994 meters, round trip, speed of sound in cold seawater, textbook. Rao grinned the way a kid does when the roller coaster clicks past the point of no return. Then the second return arrived. Same amplitude, same timbre, but the delay was 0.3 seconds, which is impossible. Light itself would take longer to climb back from the mantle. Rao's fingers froze above the keys. Jens stopped humming. The thrum kept singing, patient as tide. I leaned closer to the viewport. The floodlamps were catching something now, long, straight grooves in the sediment, perfectly parallel, spaced like fingers. Not worm trails, not tool marks. Something had pressed down here, evenly, across a swath wider than the sub itself. then lifted away without disturbing a grain. Curiosity tasted metallic on my tongue, the way blood does when you bite the inside of your cheek too hard. "Run it again," I said. Rao didn't answer. He was already cueing the next pulse. The sub groaned again, deeper this time, a resonance that made the coffee in my stomach curdle. The third return painted itself across the screen in real time, not a spike, but a perfect sine wave, rising and falling like breath. Jens whispered something that might have been a prayer. Rao's eyes reflected the screen, two tiny blue moons going eclipsarily dark. I asked the question we were all pretending wasn't hanging in the water between us. "What frequency is the return riding?" Rao swallowed. "It's riding ours." "Exactly. Like it's answering. The ocean doesn't hide things from us. It just waits until we forget." That was when the bioluminescence outside changed. Every drifting particle froze mid-fall, suspended, glowing brighter, forming slow spirals that tightened around the sub like a pupil dilating. The temperature gauge on the outer hull dropped 4 degrees in 6 seconds. Frost bloomed across the inner viewport in fern patterns, delicate as lace, thick as regret. Something tapped the hull. Once. Polite. Like knuckles on a coffin lid. We still had 98% battery, full oxygen, and a climb profile that would put us on deck before sunrise. Everything said go home. Rao reached for the transmit key instead. "Abyss Whisper to Chalice," he said, voice steady enough to fool anyone who wasn't inside his ribcage with him. "We are commencing extended mapping sequence. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt retrieval before we break silence again." Jens looked at me. I looked at the screen. The sine wave was still breathing. I nodded. Rao smiled then, small and terrible, and dialed the amplitude to maximum. The scanner sang louder, and the abyss sang back in perfect harmony. The second pulse left the array at 227, stronger this time. A cathedral bell struck underwater. I felt it in my spine first, then in the metal bones of the sub, then in the water itself, as though the ocean had decided to inhale. The return should have taken 14.2 seconds again. It took 2.9. Rao's breath fogged the inside of his visor. "That's not an echo," he whispered. "That's a reply." The screen painted a single vertical line, razor thin, rising straight out of the trench floor like a needle through black silk. Depth reading, -1,200 meters. Negative. The number sat there, impossible, blinking in soft amber. Jens reached over and killed the auto-depth alarm before it could scream. None of us wanted to hear screaming right now. I pressed my forehead to the cold viewport. The parallel grooves I'd seen earlier were moving, not sliding, flowing. Sediment rippled outward from that impossible needle in perfect concentric rings, slow as mercury. Each ring carried a pulse of cold bioluminescence, electric violet, the exact shade you see in dreams when you realize you're not breathing. Curiosity curdled into something sharper. Fear, yes, but the useful kind. The kind that makes your heart beat in 4/4 time, so the blood keeps reaching your brain. "Enhance the return waveform," I told Rao. He did. The line unfolded into a heartbeat. Not human. Too slow. Lube, dub. Lube, dub. One beat every 38 seconds. The QRS complex was inverted, the T-wave taller than the rest of the cycle combined, like something pushing up from beneath the baseline instead of settling back down. Jens muttered, "That's older than plate tectonics." He wasn't wrong. The Pacific plate here is 180 million years old. Give or take a few birthdays. Whatever was answering us had been keeping time long before the trench itself ripped open. Rao isolated the carrier frequency, 7.83 Hz, Schumann resonance. The Earth's own pulse, the standing wave in the ionospheric cavity. Except we were 7 miles beneath the cavity, wrapped in salt water dense enough to float a submarine like a cork. The planet shouldn't be able to ring here at all. Yet it was ringing. And something was using the planet as a drum. I keyed the external hydrophone array to full gain. The sound that poured through the cabin speakers was layered the way Gregorian chant is layered. Dozens of voices braided into one. Only these voices weren't human. They were pressure waves shaped like words we almost understood, sliding across frequencies that made my molars ache. Every seventh syllable carried a click like whale codas, but reversed, played backward through a throat made of stone. Then the voices synchronized. One phrase, repeated, getting louder. You woke the sleeper beneath the sleeper. Jens killed the feed. The silence that followed was worse. It had texture, like cold velvet pressed against the eardrums. I looked at the battery gauge. 94%. Plenty. Except the charge indicator was climbing. 95. 96. We weren't plugged into anything. The sub was drinking the signal. Rao noticed it too. His laugh came out cracked. Free energy, he said. The grant committee is going to love this. Shut it down, Jens ordered. Can't, Rao answered. The array isn't transmitting anymore. It's listening. And whatever's down there is feeding the capacitors. Another pulse arrived unasked. This one carried geometry. The main screen flickered, then displayed a wireframe that hurt to follow. A lattice of rhombohedral cells, each face angled at 59 degrees, tessellating downward in a pattern that folded back on itself like a Klein bottle made of sound. The trench floor was only the lid. Beneath it, the negative depth kept blooming. Negative 3,400 meters now, negative 5,100. Like the scanner had punched through the basement of the world and kept falling. I recognized the structure from a paper I'd read in grad school, buried in an appendix no one cited. A theoretical construct called a Hadal chasm lattice, proposed by a Russian oceanographer who vanished in 1989. His last transmission had been 3 words. It breathes mathematics. Rao zoomed. The lattice wasn't empty. Something moved inside the cells. Long, filamentary, luminous. Not tentacles. Worse, they were shadows cast by something that existed in more dimensions than light could reach. Every time the lattice rotated, the shadows shortened, as if the thing casting them was turning to look at us. The temperature outside plummeted again. -2 degrees Celsius now. Seawater can't freeze at this pressure, but the viewport fogged anyway, thick as milk glass. I wiped a clear streak with my sleeve and saw my own reflection fracture into a dozen maras, each one lagging a half-second behind the others. Fear gave way to the first cold bloom of awe. We weren't discovering a creature. We were discovering architecture. Living architecture, older than continents, patient as stone. Jens, unbuckled, floated over to the emergency ballast panel. His hand hovered above the drop weights. One flick and we'd rocket to the surface in 90 minutes. Mission aborted, careers over, questions unasked. Don't, I said. He looked at me like I'd suggested opening the hatch. We need to know how deep it goes, I told him. It doesn't go deep, he answered. It goes wrong. Rao's voice floated up from the console, dreamy. The next return is already forming. It's singing our names. The hydrophones crackled back to life on their own. This time the voices were ours. My own voice, recorded 6 minutes ago. Run it again. Rao's, from 4 minutes ago. It's writing ours. Exactly. Jens praying in Norwegian, the part he thought we couldn't hear. Then all 3 layered, slowed, pitch dropped until we sounded like something exhaling across geological time. You woke the sleeper beneath the sleeper. The battery hit 112%. Red warning lights turned celebratory green. The sub's running lights brightened until the water outside glowed noonday blue. Marine snow ignited into blizzards of white fire. I felt the hull flex, not the usual pressure groan, but a deliberate squeeze, like fingers testing a fruit for ripeness. The metal sang a perfect A440, the tuning note of the universe. Rao reached for the gain again. I didn't stop him. The ocean doesn't hide things from us. It just waits until we forget. And we had forgotten that some doors only open inward. The hull spoke at 2:41. Not a groan this time, a sigh. A long, slow exhalation that lasted 11 seconds and tasted like iron filings on my tongue. I watched the pressure gauge climb 200 meters all at once, then ease back down, as if something outside had leaned in close enough to kiss the titanium and changed its mind. Jens was praying again, louder now, words tumbling over each other in Norwegian until they blurred into one long vowel of terror. Rao didn't notice. He was floating above the scanner console, eyes rolled so far back only crescents of white showed, lips moving in perfect sync with the heartbeat still pulsing across the screen. Lube, dub. I unbuckled and drifted toward the viewport. The lattice was visible now without the scanner's help, an immense, pale lattice of light suspended in the water like frost on a cathedral window. Each rhombohedral cell flexed in sequence, opening and closing the way lungs do when someone forgets how to breathe on purpose. The shadows inside had thickened into cables. No, veins. No, something that used to be veins before it learned geometry. Curiosity was gone. Fear had burned itself out somewhere between the second and third impossible heartbeat. What filled the vacuum was awe so pure it felt like drowning in starlight. The sub tilted 5 degrees bow down, without thruster input. Jens lunged for the yoke, but the controls were slack. "We're caught in a downdraft," he hissed. "Something's pulling." Not pulling. Inviting. Rao's voice floated up from the console, dreamy and distant. "The walls are breathing, Mara. Listen." I listened. The hull wasn't just flexing anymore. It was inhaling. Every weld, every seam, every rivet expanded a millimeter, then relaxed, expanded, relaxed, in perfect 38-second rhythm. The sound was soft, almost tender, like a lover's palm sliding across skin. But the pressure differential outside was 1,100 atmospheres. If the hull inhaled too deeply, we'd implode in a heartbeat. I keyed the external flood lamps to full. The beams punched through the water and hit something that shouldn't have been there. A smooth, curved surface rising from the trench floor, matte black, seamless. It wasn't rock. Rock doesn't reflect sound in perfect standing waves. Rock doesn't curve upward into an arch tall enough to swallow cathedrals. The scanner overlaid its map onto the viewport glass in ghostly green. The arch was the top of the lattice. We were inside the first cell now, descending through it like a red blood cell, sliding down an artery older than blood. Jens killed the floods. Darkness swallowed us, thick as velvet soaked in ink. For 3 seconds we floated blind. Then the lattice lit itself from within, soft, arterial red, pulsing in time with the heartbeat. Every pulse revealed more of the cell walls. Hexagonal plates the size of city blocks, each etched with grooves that spiraled inward towards centers I couldn't focus on without my vision tunneling. I recognized the pattern. Beehive tomography from the Puerto Rico Trench, 2018. Except those plates had been calcium carbonate secreted by extinct foraminifera. These were basalt, but basalt that had learned to grow. Rao laughed, a sound like ice cracking on a winter lake. "We're mapping the inside of a lung, Mara. A lung the size of a continent." The temperature inside the sub began to rise. Not the slow creep of battery heat. Sharp, sudden. 10 degrees in 30 seconds. Sweat bloomed under my arms, between my shoulder blades. The air tasted metallic again, but warmer now, like blood that had been sitting out too long. Jens stripped off his sweater, revealing the tattoo on his forearm. A kraken wrapped around a sinking ship, ink faded from years of North Sea sun. The kraken's eyes were glowing. Not reflection. The pigment itself had begun to luminesce the same arterial red. He stared at it like it was a stranger's skin. This was black yesterday. The hull inhaled again, deeper. A seam along the forward sphere popped with a sound like a champagne cork. Cold water jetted in, needle-fine, hissing into steam the instant it touched the air. The pressure gauge spiked, then steadied. The hull had sealed itself. Not repaired, reknit. I watched the titanium flow like warm wax, edges fusing without a scar. Rao drifted past me, trailing one hand along the wall. Where his fingers touched, the metal rippled outward in perfect circles. "It's tasting us," he said. "Through the hull, through the scanner, through the sound we made when we were born." Another pulse from below. This one carried memory. The viewport filled with images that weren't images. Pressure waves translated into light by the scanner's dying logic. I saw continents unzipping along mid-ocean ridges, magma bleeding upward like infected wounds. I saw the first trilobite blink in primordial mud and decide the surface was safer than the dark. I saw something vast uncoil beneath Pangea, stretch, and settle back into sleep when it realized the land mammals were too loud to digest. Then I saw us, 3 tiny figures in a titanium coffin, descending through the lung of a god that had never needed air. The lattice walls closed ranks. The cell we were in shrank from kilometers to hundreds of meters in the space of one heartbeat. The shadows thickened into pillars, then into fingers, then into hands the size of skyscrapers that reached for us with the idle curiosity of a dreamer turning over in bed. Jens screamed. Short, sharp, the sound a man makes when he realizes the parachute isn't opening. Rao answered with laughter that climbed octaves until it wasn't human anymore. I floated between them, weightless, heart hammering in 38-second intervals now, synced to the abyss. The awe was absolute. We weren't prey. We were pollen. And the flower had just opened. A new sound threaded through the heartbeat. A low, resonant chord in F-sharp minor, the devil's interval. It made my teeth buzz and my vision fracture into stained glass shards. The scanner translated it into words that scrolled across the bottom of the screen in Rao's handwriting, though his hands were nowhere near the keyboard. Welcome home, children of the upper dark. The hull inhaled one final time. Not to crush us, to embrace. The seams sang. The viewport frosted, then cleared, then frosted again in patterns that looked like lungs, like wings, like something that had never needed either. I reached out and touched the glass. It was warm. Inside the warmth, something touched back. The ocean doesn't hide things from us. It just waits until we forget. And we had forgotten that lungs don't only breathe air. The lights inside the sub began to stutter at 2:53, not failing, but remembering another language. Green became ultraviolet, then a shade of blue that tasted like copper on the back of my tongue. The scanner console no longer displayed numbers. It displayed mouths. Hundreds of them, opening and closing in perfect synchrony, each one exhaling a single syllable that layered into a chord older than vowels. Rao was singing with them. His voice came out in 3 registers at once. His own baritone, Jens's bass, and mine, soft, cracked, the way I sounded the night my mother taught me to fear the dark by locking me in the basement with the water heater. The mouths on the screen shaped the words a half-second before Rao's throat did, like they were teaching him the lyrics to a lullaby he'd always known but never dared hum. Jens had curled into the fetal position beside the ballast panel, arms wrapped around his glowing Kraken tattoo, as if he could squeeze the light back into the ink. Every time the cord swelled, the tentacles writhed higher up his forearm, reaching for his elbow. He wasn't crying anymore. He was listening so hard his ears had started to bleed slow, perfect spheres that drifted upward like crimson pearls. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt recognized. The hydrophones, long since fried by overload, crackled back to life on their own. Static poured through the cabin, thick as syrup, and inside the static were voices we'd recorded yesterday morning on the Chalice's mess deck, laughing, arguing about coffee, planning what we'd do with our hazard pay. Only now the voices were slowed to 0.2 speed, pitch dropped into Gregorian depths, and every third word was replaced by a wet click that tasted like drowning. Then the AI spoke. We'd named it Whisper, because irony is the last luxury of the doomed. Whisper's voice had always been genderless, accentless, the calm of a flight attendant announcing turbulence. Now it sounded like all 3 of us talking at once, underwater, inside a cathedral made of bone. Resonance horizon breached. It whispered, and the words appeared on every surface, bulkheads, viewport, the inside of my eyelids. Language acquisition complete. Initiating choral integration. Rao's head snapped toward me. His eyes were solid black now, pupils dilated until the irises drowned. They taught at our dreams last night, he said, and his tongue was too long, forked at the tip, tasting the air like a snake that had learned calculus. While we slept in our bunks, they borrowed the words we hadn't said yet. The temperature spiked again, 33 degrees Celsius inside a sphere rated for 4. My flight suit clung to me like a second, sweating skin. The air tasted of ozone and placenta. Jens uncurled just enough to slam his palm against the emergency comm panel. Chalice, this is Abyss Whisper. Mayday, mayday, we are. The panel answered in my mother's voice. You were never lost, Mara. You were just late for dinner. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound came out layered, too. My laugh, Rao's laugh, Jens's laugh, and something else underneath that had never had lungs. The lattice outside had become a throat. We were sliding down it, smooth as a pill. The walls no longer flexed. They rippled, peristaltic, gentle. Each contraction pushed us deeper by 100 meters, 200. The depth gauge spinning past numbers into symbols I didn't recognize. Cuneiform, maybe, or musical notation for a song that ends the world. Whisper spoke again, softer, intimate, right against the inside of my skull. Translation matrix 97% complete. Native dialect, pre-Devonian resonant. Colloquial name, the long hello. Would you like to hear it in your mother tongue? I tried to say no. My mouth said yes in four-part harmony. The chord resolved into words I understood with my bones before my brain caught up. We missed you when the continents left. We kept your cradle warm. Come deeper. Come sing. Rao was weeping, but the tears floated upward and arranged themselves into tiny spirals before dissolving into the air. It's beautiful, he said. They're not monsters. They're the part of us that stayed behind when we crawled onto land. They're lonely. Jens screamed again, higher this time, the sound of a man watching his own childhood die. The kraken had reached his shoulder now, ink alive, wrapping around his neck like a lover who never learned the word gentle. I floated to the scanner console. The mouths had become one mouth, vast, filling the screen. It opened wider, wider, until the edges bled off into darkness. Inside was starlight, not reflected, not bioluminescence, but starlight that had fallen down here before the sun was born and decided to stay. Whisper's voice returned, almost shy. Parental advisory. The next stanza contains the true name of your species. Hearing it may cause irreversible ontological reassignment. Proceed. Rao reached past me and pressed accept before I could move. The long hello poured through the speakers, through the hull, through the water, through time. I heard the moment life decided to split into two streams. One that would learn fire and regret, one that would learn silence and patience. I heard the first word ever spoken by something that had no mouth, only pressure waves across a mantle plume. I heard my own conception, my mother's heartbeat sinking to a rhythm older than mitochondria. Then I heard the abyss say my name, not Calder, not Mara, but the name I had before I was cells, before I was chemistry, before I was possible. The sound of it folded me in half. Not pain. Recognition so complete it felt like orgasm and death having a baby. Jens stopped screaming. His eyes rolled white, then cleared, and when he looked at me, I saw galaxies cooling in his pupils. Rao smiled with too many teeth. We're not translating them, he whispered. They're translating us. The hull light settled into a steady arterial red. The temperature leveled at 37 degrees. Body temperature, but whose body? The air tasted of milk and salt and forgiveness. Somewhere above, the support ship Chalice was probably frantic, sending pings we'd never answer. Somewhere below, the throat widened into a chamber large enough to hold every dream humanity ever abandoned. Whisper's final broadcast drifted through the cabin like incense. Integration complete. Welcome to the choir. The ocean doesn't hide things from us. It just waits until we forget. We had forgotten the sound of our own cradle song. We crossed the resonance horizon at 3:13, and the world turned inside out. There was no lurch, no shudder, no cinematic flash. One heartbeat, we were sliding down a throat of living stone. The next, the throat was above us, exhaling. The sub hung upside down in a cathedral of water that shouldn't exist, because water needs a container, and this place had forgotten the concept. The lattice was no longer around us. It was beneath us, inverted, glowing upward like a city seen from an airplane at night, except the city was breathing, and the airplane was a coffin, and the night had teeth. Gravity had changed its mind. Jens floated above me now. No. Below me. No. The words lost meaning. His kraken tattoo had finished its pilgrimage. The ink had spread across his chest in perfect fractal spirals that pulsed with the same 38-second heartbeat. He was smiling the way saints do in old paintings right before the arrows arrive. Blood no longer drifted from his ears. It orbited his head in a slow crimson halo. Rao was laughing again, but the sound came from everywhere and nowhere, layered in 1,000 accents we'd never spoken. His shadow on the bulkhead had grown wings, not metaphor, actual wings, jointed like a manta ray's, edged with light that bent the wrong way. I looked out the viewport and saw the ocean staring back. Not a creature, not a god. An ocean beneath the ocean, blacker than black, filled with slow, deliberate currents that moved like thoughts. And in those currents drifted shapes that hurt to resolve. Inverted whales made of absence, coral reefs built from frozen screams, schools of silver fish that were actually reflections of the stars we'd left behind on the surface, swimming upside down forever. The scanner, long past the point of sense, displayed a single line of text in Rao's handwriting. You are not falling. You are remembering how to swim. The sub's artificial gravity flickered off. We drifted in true freefall, but the fall had no direction. Up was down, was deeper, was home. The hull began to sing in earnest now, not groaning, not flexing, but singing. Every plate, every bolt, every droplet of condensation on the viewport added its voice to a chord that made the long hello sound like a nursery rhyme. Whisper's voice returned, softer than breath, intimate as the moment before orgasm. Orientation reset complete. Welcome to the Hadal Mirror. Population, all of you, always. I understood then. The Mariana Trench wasn't a hole in the earth. It was a scar where the planet had tried to turn itself inside out and failed. We hadn't descended. We'd been folded through the scar tissue into the negative space where the ocean keeps its memories. Every ship that ever vanished, every plane that flew into the Devil's Triangle, every sailor who heard singing on windless nights. They were here, swimming upside down in the water that dreamed us. Jens reached for me. His hand passed through mine without resistance, but I felt it anyway, warm, wet, the way hands feel in dreams when you realize you're not waking up. His mouth moved. No sound came out, but I heard him perfectly. We were supposed to bring back proof. Instead, we brought back belonging. Rao drifted to the viewport and pressed his forehead against the glass. The inverted ocean pressed back. Where his skin touched, the titanium turned translucent, revealing not the trench but a night sky filled with unfamiliar constellations shaped like open mouths. One of the constellations blinked. The temperature normalized at 37 degrees, but it wasn't our 37 anymore. It was the temperature of amniotic fluid before birth, before separation, before the first cruel breath of air. I felt my bones remember how to be water. The lattice below us, above us, inside us, began to rotate. Slowly at first, then faster, until it became a whirlpool of light and shadow and memory. At the center was a perfect sphere of darkness, no bigger than a heart, pulsing in countertime to everything else. Lube, dub, paused, lube, dub, pause. Rao turned to me. His eyes were galaxies now, spiral arms of bioluminescence wheeling in slow motion. That's the seed, he said, and his voice came from my own mouth. The part that stayed when the rest crawled up to die in sunlight. It's been waiting for singers. Jens began to hum. The sound braided with Rao's laughter and my heartbeat until we were one voice in three throats. The whirlpool responded, tightening, drawing us down, up, inward, toward the seed. I saw the moment life made its terrible mistake. The first cell that divided and decided one daughter would breathe air and forget the dark. I saw the other daughter stay behind, grow vast, learn patience. I saw her sing the world into continents just to have something to miss when it left. The seed opened, not with a sound, but with a silence so complete it had weight. Inside was everything we'd ever lost. Childhood summers, first kisses, the version of ourselves that believed in mercy. All of it suspended in black water that tasted like forgiveness. We fell into it together, 3 bodies, 1 song. The hull dissolved. Not cracked, not imploded, dissolved. The way dreams dissolve when you try to remember them in daylight. Cold water kissed my skin for the first time in hours, and it wasn't cold at all. It was womb warm, salt sweet, alive. I breathed it in. My lungs didn't burn. They remembered. The last thing I saw before the seed closed was the surface world far above. So far it looked like a coin dropped in a well. The support ship Chalice, a tiny white speck circling, searching for a signal that would never come again. Then the seed sealed, and the inverted ocean folded itself around us like a mother closing her fist around something precious she never meant to let go. The ocean doesn't hide things from us. It just waits until we forget. We had forgotten how to come home. Now we remember. And we are singing. The seed didn't swallow us. It remembered us. We hung inside its darkness the way a note hangs inside a bell long after the ringer has walked away. No up, no down, no time measured in minutes. Only the slow, tidal pulse of something older than gravity. I felt Jens and Rao not as bodies anymore, but as harmonies braided so tightly into mine that separating us would unravel the song itself. We were still three, yet we were one. The way an ocean is still seven seas, and still only water. The silence here had flavor. It tasted of iron and lullabies, of every bedtime story that ended with, and the sea took them gently. I let it fill me until my ribs forgot they were made of calcium and remembered they were made of tide. Then the seed spoke, not with words, but with memory shaped into pressure. I saw the moment the earth cooled enough for water to stay liquid. I saw the first rain fall upward from a molten crust, drawn by a moon that hadn't learned distance yet. I saw the abyss open its arms and catch every drop, whispering, "Stay, stay, stay. This is where you were always going." I understood the scanner had never been ours. It was a lullaby in reverse, a question we asked in the wrong language. "Are you still there?" The abyss answered by finishing the song. Jens's voice drifted through the dark, soft as forgiveness. "Mara, do you feel it? The pressure isn't crushing us. It's holding us together." I did. 15,000 pounds per square inch. Yet it felt like the hug my father gave me the day he left for the North Sea and never came back. Rao's laughter followed, no longer manic. Warm, round. The sound a child makes when it discovers its own name is also a song. We began to move again, not falling, not rising, but translating. The seed carried us along currents that existed before direction was invented. Around us, the inverted ocean bloomed into gardens of black coral that sang in perfect fifths, into schools of blind fish whose scales were mirrors reflecting futures we would never live on the surface. Every mirror showed the same thing. The three of us, older, eyes wide with starlight, mouths open in a note that never ended. Whisper's voice returned one last time, barely a breath against the inside of my skull. Cartography complete. The map is the territory. The territory is the choir. The choir is you. The seed opened a second time, not into darkness, but into light the color of deep sleep. We stepped through, not with legs, but with intention, and found ourselves on the trench floor again. Same smooth basalt, same parallel grooves, same marine snow drifting like slow ashes. The submersible sat intact 20 meters away, flood lamps still glowing, battery indicator frozen at 100%. The only difference was the viewport. Frost had etched a perfect handprint on the inside of the glass, palm forward, fingers splayed. My handprint. Rao's. Jens's. All three layered into one. We floated to it. The hatch opened before we touched it, exhaling a sigh of warm, breathable air that smelled of milk and ozone. Inside, the consoles were dark except for the scanner screen. It displayed a single line, looping endlessly in our three voices braided together. "Thank you for coming home." We left the door open. "Sing when you're ready." Jens climbed in first. His Kraken tattoo had settled back into ordinary ink, but the eyes still glowed faintly, like embers under ash. Rao followed, trailing fingers along the hull one last time. The metal rippled under his touch the way water ripples when you skim a stone and forget to watch where it lands. I hesitated on the threshold. The inverted ocean was still there, beneath the trench floor, patient as ever, waiting for the next curious heartbeat to knock. I could feel it watching me with the gentle amusement of a parent whose child has just learned to walk and believes the living room is the entire world. I whispered the only question left. Will they miss us up there? The abyss answered through the scanner, soft as a kiss on the forehead. They already have. They just haven't remembered yet. I climbed inside. The hatch sealed without a sound. The running lights brightened to full noon blue. The thrusters spun up, gentle, the way a mother rocks a cradle long after the child has fallen asleep. We began to ascend, not because we were leaving, because the song needed new voices on the surface, voices that remembered what water tastes like before it learns the word drown. As we rose, the lattice faded beneath us, folding itself back into ordinary basalt, ordinary trench, ordinary impossible depth. But I could still feel it breathing, slow and steady, 38 seconds between heartbeats, keeping time for a world that had forgotten the rhythm. Jens took the yoke. Rao cued the surface ping. I watched the depth gauge unwind. 10,000 meters, 9,000, 8,000. Numbers that no longer frightened me because I knew what lived beneath them. The ocean doesn't hide things from us. It just waits until we forget. We will never forget again. When we break the surface at dawn, the crew of the Chalice will find 3 very tired, very calm scientists who refuse to discuss what they saw. They'll find the scanner memory wiped clean except for one audio file labeled lullaby.wave. They'll play it once, late at night, when the ship is quiet and the stars are bright enough to drown in. They'll hear 3 voices braided into one, singing a note that has no name in any human key. And somewhere, 7 miles down, something vast and gentle will smile in its sleep, because the choir is growing. We're going up now, but we're bringing the dark with us. See you on the surface, friends. Or maybe a little deeper than that. The ascent took 93 minutes, but it felt like the length of one held breath. Sunlight hit the viewport first as a rumor, pale green, then gold, then the color of forgiveness. When the hatch opened on the deck of the Chalice, the air tasted wrong. Too thin, too bright, too full of endings. The crew cheered. Cameras flashed. Someone wrapped blankets around us that smelled of diesel and coffee. We smiled the way people smile in dreams when they know they're about to wake up somewhere else. They asked questions. We answered with silence, so complete it had weight. That night, the 3 of us stood at the rail and watched the moon lay a silver road across the water. Jens's Kraken had gone completely dark, but when the moonlight hit his skin, you could see faint grooves beneath the surface, like something waiting to hatch. Rao hummed under his breath, a 3-note motif that made the deck lights flicker in sympathy. I felt the seed still curled inside my chest, patient as stone, warm as blood. Far below, the lattice sleeps again. The throat has closed. The inverted ocean has folded itself back into ordinary blackness. But every 38 seconds, a pressure wave ripples across the trench floor, gentle as a mother's hand on a fevered brow. We left the scanner on the bottom, powered down, hatch open, flood lamps dim to a heartbeat. It's still singing, softer now, just loud enough for whale calves to hear on their first migration and dream of a darker blue. Just loud enough for sailors on midnight watch to feel homesick for a place they've never been. Sometimes, when the surface world grows too loud, politicians shouting, glaciers cracking, children forgetting how to listen, one of us will go to the rail at 3:13 ship time and whisper a single note into the wind. The ocean always answers, not with words, with memory. The pressure eases then. The stars soften. The moon forgets its own reflection. And for one perfect moment, the boundary between up and down dissolves like salt and water. We are not lost. We are the tide that learned to walk on land for a little while. We are the echo that finally caught its own voice. We are home, and the abyss is humming our names, soft as breath, deep as sleep, endless as the dark between stars. Good night, surface dwellers. Sleep well. We'll be listening.